Hey everyone, welcome. You found us on another Friday with the week Unspun, a live look at the world through the eyes of PR people. I'm one of your hosts, David Gallagher, sitting here in London, joined by the irrepressible Doug Downs in Calgary today.
Irascible.
Irascible.
Yes.
Uh, we're flying by the seat of our pants without our third partner in crime, Farzana
Yes.
Baduel, who's at a
Farzana is
fancy lunch.
normally she's normally in London, sort of with you, not with you, but same city. She's in New York at the UN.
Actually, she has been in New York at the UN. She is back in London at a very fancy lunch with the
Oh, is that
CIPR.
okay? See, I was thinking she was caught on an escalator at the UN, and I could understand. You go on these escalators, especially at the UN, they're pretty sketchy and they break down at any particular time. At most unfortunate times, they break down.
Well, this is the difference between Farzana and you and me, Doug. I mean, so she spent the first half of the week at the UN General Assembly. She's now at a very fancy lunch for the royally chartered Institute of PR. Last week, I just saw on her Instagram she was at some fancy flagship store opening on Regent Street. So that's how she spends her time. And I was
I
thinking, for
know.
me, a special occasion is when I go out for pizza rather than ordering pizza in. So that's how you know the difference between me and
I
Farzana.
agree. I find a T-shirt that doesn't have a pizza stain on it, and that's when I know I'm going out, right? Or the bill of my cap is bent properly, something
Well,
like
we
that.
probably just lost half of our audience now, knowing that the Farzana is not here, but they're in for a special treat.
Yes.
You have kindly suggested that we invite Michelle Garrett onto the show. I've known her for years. I know she's going to have a lot of good comments to make, and we're grateful for her presence. So maybe you tell us a little bit about Michelle. Hey, Michelle.
Michelle.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Very
It's
happy to have you here.
awesome to have you. Let me introduce you, semi-former Michelle. You're a B2B public relations consultant, writer, a speaker. You help companies in tech, industrial, and manufacturing earn media coverage, create content, and build thought leadership. You're the author of B2B PR That Gets Results, a book I don't have a hard copy of. I'm just saying, not saying, just saying, but
Oh,
left off the list. A frequent contributor to outlets like Muckrack and Notified, regular speaker at industry events, frequent speaker on Stories and Strategies podcast. I think you've been on like 5 times,
I think so.
something like that. And you're the host. You have your own podcast. You're the host of PR Explored, the podcast.
Yes,
So,
correct. Thank
okay.
you.
Well, we're so
Awesome.
happy to have you here. I don't know how much you know about our show, but we on Wednesday, Thursday, we start texting each other with what we think are kind of the most interesting stories, usually from a PR angle. It does dip occasionally into politics because politics are kind of driving the news cycle. But we try to look at this more from how would you explain this? What lessons can you take away from a PR point of view? So I know we've already kind of flagged the Tylenol question in the U.S. is something we might want to explore. I'm kind of interested in that. Doug has been interested in the Jimmy Kimmel, which maybe has morphed into an ABC story.
I think it has. It's kind of a Disney thing, and from a PR lens, anyway. The Jimmy Kimmel with the PR lens is one thing, but I think it's really how Disney, I think, got caught in a hard situation. So
Yep.
I want to talk through that.
So we want to talk about that. If we have time, we'd like to talk, or I just discovered this last night. There's a new Ipsos study, Brand America, that talks about a significant decline in the intent to buy and trust for American brands by non-Americans, and the difference is pretty startling. So I thought that might be an interesting thing to take a look at. And of course, please chime in anything you want to throw into the conversation. That's about as structured as it gets by us just sort of agreeing in advance what we might talk about. But I did want to talk about the Tylenol story. It really struck a personal chord with me. I have spent a lot of my career dealing with product safety issues in the healthcare and medical space. I've dealt with product recalls, with changes to labels, with big breaking scientific studies pointing to adverse reactions. I even worked on the Tylenol brand when it was a J&J product, not on the master class tampering crisis case. Somewhat after that, but I'm pretty familiar with how things work in that space. And I just thought it was a really troubling development in the way product safety concerns were raised. And just for people who don't know about it, I can't imagine there aren't too many people who haven't heard about it, but President Trump, during a hastily called press conference, basically told people who were using acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol, it's called paracetamol in the UK, basically said if you're pregnant, you shouldn't use it. It's been linked to autism. And that's a very strong overstatement of the facts, and obviously led to a lot of concern and confusion. And I host a big PR chat and several other kind of communications chats, and everybody kind of joked and said, "Oh, you got to pity the PR team at Tylenol right now," and you do to some degree. I was on the PR team for Tylenol, but I guess my reaction was really maybe a different ranking of stakeholders, and I'm guessing this is what was happening at Kinview, the new owners of Tylenol, in their headquarters. I think the first people you got to worry about are mothers, expectant mothers, families, recent mothers. How much concern this must be causing them. So obviously we got to worry. They've got to be worried about how do you communicate with your consumers, not actually patients, because this is an over-the-counter product, but how do you worry about your consumers? Then how do you get aligned with healthcare professionals? I'm guessing most people, if they're not interacting on this particular question with their OBGYN, they're talking to maybe a midwife, maybe to their pharmacist. So there's a lot of people you got to communicate with there to get aligned. There are your biggest customers, your Walmarts and your Costco's, people who are distributing the product need to get aligned. And of course, you got to worry about your shareholders and the people who are invested in the business. And I just can't imagine the activity, the frantic activity that must be happening right now. But I'm just wondering what you both think, both about the issue. And again, I don't understand the political dynamics. Let's put that to one side. I don't get what was gained by that. But now this whole issue has been introduced into the public sphere. And I'm wondering, how do you think the company is responding? What do you think they should be saying? What's your take?
Well, I do have thoughts. So I mean, I'm of the mind that I might go out and buy more Tylenols. It might be a good thing for them.
Good for sales.
I don't know about that, but as somebody who has a mom of two, when I was expecting, they advised to take Tylenol. And of course, I've also seen called into question, should you give your little ones Tylenol? Perhaps, I just think it's going to cause a lot of issues because it's very safe. I don't think there's data that says it isn't safe, because when the kids are little, that's what they tell you to give them too. So I had a friend this week go into a pharmacy, and someone, she was buying Tylenol, and the clerk actually said something to her about, is that okay? Is that safe for you? And I'm like, wow, okay. We shouldn't be calling into question. And the fact that people just listen to this advice from folks who aren't really medical professionals is something. So, I hope I'm going to support Tylenol and continue to buy and take Tylenol. So.
Yeah.
Do you think most moms get it? I mean, what's the decibel level of concern? Or are people rolling their eyes at this? Or do you think this has created concern where there wasn't concern before?
Well, I think to people that listen to what comes out of this administration, they would put some, they would believe what they say, and that's very detrimental, potentially. So, I mean, the people, for example, on Threads, where I spend some time, people are, largely like, what, like are not buying into it. But again, it probably depends on the, where you spend time and who you listen to. But I hope that people will listen to the actual medical community, because I think, again, I'm not going to name names of all the organizations that have come out and said Tylenol is safe, and this advice is not. This is not medical advice that you should be following, and it's not medical advice at all, actually. So
sometimes Trump just starts lipping off about things, and I think he got caught in a moment where he was unprepared. He didn't know how to pronounce acetaminophen, clearly stumbled over it, named Tylenol, which I agree, that's a potential lawsuit there. Whether Kenview chooses to pursue that or not, I have no idea. Just looking at the stock price to see the impact, and it's hard to pin any impact to the stock price from this fiasco, because it's been on a slide for months. So the stock price in Kenvue has been heading downward for a while, and that's probably because they knew the market has known that the FDA was sour on acetaminophen to begin with. So I think Trump got caught lipping off. And David, to the science, and you worked at Tylenol. There have long been studies that associate Tylenol with autism. Very important word, because coffee is associated with cancer, for heaven's sakes. I know that from my time working in the electrical industry. And so it's not saying it's benign, but these are weak associations. To say the word link or linked, that's the disastrous piece here. It's a point in time where messaging word by word is actually really important.
Yeah. Well, I didn't work for Tylenol. I worked for an agency that supported Tylenol, so I don't want to misstate that. But I had, for a long time, I was pretty steeped in the science, and we could have a whole show on the difference between cause and correlation. The example I always like is that, crime goes up in the summer and ice cream sales go up in the summer. You could say there's a correlation, but there's probably not causality in that. I also don't want to discount the very distinct possibility that there could be an actual causation, but none of the science suggests that right now at all. And I think this probably has introduced an unnecessary element of concern when you've got a lot of other things as an expectant mother or a recent family or people with new kids to worry about. This shouldn't be one of the things you have to worry about. But from a corporate response, I have wondered. Now, I honestly don't know. Maybe there's a lawyer listening who could write in for us. I don't know what legal recourse you have. I mean, can you sue the White House? I don't know. I guess they could try. I think they probably have to show some sort of malice that he knew it was untrue. They probably could show some sort of material damage. I'm sure whether the stock price started sliding before or not, this probably didn't help it. But from a PR point of view, I think they've been pretty forceful. From what I can tell, they push back pretty hard. I think they're working to gather with the support from the medical and public health community, from the pharmacy community. So I think they're doing the right things. I think the question will be, can they just ride out this storm, or do they need to continue to push? Here's Eva has a comment.
I like Eva's question here. It's a good one for Michelle. She's asking about the public response in the US. So Michelle, you said you were tempted to go out and just buy more, start pumping more Tylenol, which is probably the wrong way to go, because the studies say use as directed. Don't start pumping Tylenol like
I don't mean take a lot. I mean, let's go stock up before they pull it off the shelves, potentially. Yeah. And for some people with high blood pressure and other conditions, that is the only thing they can take. They cannot take ibuprofen it makes your blood pressure go up higher. So, I mean, I'm floored.
Michelle,
yes.
You're in Columbus. South of you is Cincinnati or Cincinnati, right? Got sort of a more southern feel to it, just north of Kentucky.
Right.
How do people in Cincinnati feel about Tylenol? Are they potentially not going to use Tylenol, pregnant women, or are they, the hell with this?
I really feel like people in larger cities are going to continue to use it. I feel like this is more, again, and not to go too far here, but I think this is depending on, who you listen to, perhaps where you live in a smaller community, rural community or something like that, perhaps. But yeah, no, I haven't yet seen, and it's early, a lot of people saying, well, I'm never taking Tylenol again, because again, doctors will tell you to take Tylenol when you're in the hospital, not even as a new mom, they give you Tylenol. So it just isn't, it's so far away from there's no grounds for it.
What a time to be alive. Well, sorry. Thanks for letting me talk a little bit about Tylenol. Like I say, my heart does go out for the PR teams, but really it goes out for people who are worried about this when I don't think they really need to be. Doug, we last week we talked a little bit about the Jimmy Kimmel saga, which moved quickly into new territory this week, and I don't think either one of us predicted that he'd be back on the air quite so.
Sort of back, right? About a quarter of the ABC stations, the ones that are managed through the ownership groups, Nexstar and Sinclair, they still won't put Kimmel back on the air for the things that he said. And I understand why they're a bit lit up about it. I mean, the controversy begins with Kimmel shortly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk saying, and I quote, "Many in MAGA land are working hard to capitalize on the murder of Charlie Kirk." And he has since, he hasn't apologized, but he has since recognized that he probably shouldn't have said that he stepped too far. And I appreciate that, at the wrong time. And he was pulled off the air by ABC. And then Disney announced this past week that no, he's back on the air, but they don't completely control it. About a quarter of the ABC stations run by those ownership groups have decided, no, they're not putting Kimmel back on the air. He had some 6 million people watch his monologue the night that he returned? Massive audience, right?
Big
Probably a
spike in his
one-time audience for him, but
well, it was almost maybe as an illustration of the Michelle Garrett effect of stockpiling Jimmy Kimmel when he came back, and who knows how long he's going to be on. But it to me, again, separating the actual, what he said and the reaction to it, it just shows that we live in a different time right now. And I think that his show actually, well, it got a boost from this, and I think it will continue in some other format, probably streaming or offline, or as a as its own podcast and show. And it probably won't be on late night linear TV. I'm not sure that was a sustainable path anyway. But it's just interesting what kind of jolted this action, and his numbers were better, without having as many stations carry him. So
it's sort of a. And I don't know if it's the Barbara Streisand effect. That's a little bit different, but I call it the Democrat Party 2024 effect, where they tried desperately to keep Trump from even being on the ballot, and it backfired tremendously on them. Yeah. Right? It worked the other way. So just the playbook works across party lines. Michelle, for me, the Kimmel, I want to test this with you. It's not so much the Kimmel story so much as the Disney story. From my perspective, Disney's caught in a tough place. Kimmel made some remarks that for half the country are offensive. So they reacted within the ecosphere. Kimmel was taken off the air. I understand why a stand was made, because we're constantly seeing studies that brands have to show their principles. So he was taken off the air. And then this big hullabaloo, the ALCU, responded. They had a lot of Hollywood celebrities sign on with it, and they don't always sign on with the ALCU with a letter saying, no, Kimmel should be put back on the air in the interest of free speech, put back on the air. And it was Disney that stepped forward and more or less apologized for having taken him off the air at the same time. I think Disney's caught in a hard place. This time they responded. They took a stand. Going back a few years with the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, they didn't respond, and they got crucified. This time they do respond, and they get crucified. They try to play the middle because taking a side for them is disastrous. They kind of have to play the middle. And America is so divided in the end. You're red or you're blue. There doesn't seem to be any purple anymore.
Well, guess how Disney has responded, and Hulu. Guess how they've responded?
By raising prices.
They hiked their rates, and I'm like, wow. I mean, talk about a in your face, to their audience. Like, that's my biggest takeaway. I think, is that just like, surely the price hike was in the works before all of this started, right? I get it. However, read the room. I mean, like, don't throw gasoline on a fire. Like, they had to have known this. And then that makes me think, well, then they surely just don't care. They're just like, nope, we don't, we're just doing it anyway. And they've already lost, an astounding amount. And again, this is interesting to me because people, say these boycotts don't work. Well, I mean, power to the people on this one, because I think, I think it kind of did work. So we'll see.
Yeah, I have no idea where this goes or really what this means, which is probably a theme for my comments most weeks. But if you try to step back and you look at the media environment right now, and you think about how difficult, and I'm not defending or supporting how Disney handled this, but you've got distributors in the form of their affiliate networks that are running the old school turn on the TV at 11 and watch Jimmy Kimmel show, which is a declining market. They've got their own streaming services that are probably the most important part of the revenue. I haven't looked that up to confirm it, where they took a beating because people were canceling. You've got talent, past, present, and future, saying we're not going to be part of this unless you start standing up to this this behavior, this administration. And then you've got Jimmy Kimmel himself, who now has a bigger microphone, a bigger megaphone than he had before. I don't think Disney was particularly agile in the way they handled this in the first place. I thought it was a little ham-fisted, and I don't think that they particularly reintroduced Jimmy in any sort of meaningful way. I felt like they sort of staggered out of the room and then staggered back into the room, and I'm not really sure if people know what's left. I will take this moment if I can, because I was trying to think when you said you wanted to talk about this, Doug. I came across another podcast from two guys I happened to meet virtually this week. And it's really interesting. And they have a really good take on this. So the podcast is called Communication Breakdown. I think we might have a look at what it looks like, David. And it was set up, I think they just had their 1-year anniversary by a guy many of you may know, Steve Dowling. He ran corporate comms at Apple and at OpenAI for more than a decade, I think. And then a guy I've known for more than a decade, Craig Carroll, who teaches at Rice University. I knew him when he's at the University of Texas, and he runs the Observatory on Corporate Reputation in New York, I think it's called. They've got a really good breakdown on this issue in particular. But I like this show, and one of the reasons I like it is because it takes topical news from a practitioner's point of view. So Steve's been in the corporate comms seat for a long time. And then from an academic point of view, like what's the framework? What's the theory? How can you look at this somewhat objectively? And that's what Craig brings to the conversation. And I went back and listened to a few episodes, and I think they do this with some discipline. But I think it's a really good addition to this ongoing conversation we're all trying to have, what we started this show to do. And one of my pet interests is how do you introduce more academic rigor into the practice of communications and PR, and without getting too highfalutin about it. But I think sometimes I know I have just mouthed off, not really knowing what the academic approach might have been, what sort of literature I could have looked at to inform recommendations or decisions I was making. So anyway, I just want to recommend them. I think we should get them on this show at some point. And I just like to encourage, when I find things I like to pass those along. So please give them a listen.
I thought they codified the Kimmel Disney story really well. I had to listen to that episode, and I thought it was put well together. David and Michelle, what are the long-term impacts to reputations for Jimmy Kimmel and for Disney? I'll go first. I think for Disney, it's benign. I don't think there's any line. Sorry, I know price increases suck, Michelle, but I don't think Disney suffers out of this. I don't think Kimmel actually comes out well for this. I know he got that big boost to his monologue. I don't think they stay, but that's my 2 cents.
Oh, I don't want to talk over you, Michelle. You go first, but I'll disagree with you on part of that, I think.
No, I think Disney's already suffering because they've offended kind of both sides. If you want to really, by, having his show is on the air and he said things that offended one side, and then they brought him back and that so everybody's kind of upset. I mean, maybe long-term it blows over, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like, and for Kimmel, I think it's actually a good thing. I mean, I think, everybody is making a point, or many people are talking about the, late night shows are kind of dying out. And of course, yes, the ratings will bear that out. However, I do think, even if, like Colbert is ending, so those folks are going to go on and have a following, have an audience, on another platform. So.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Michelle on this one. I might be even more neutral, though. I think people have really short memories, and I don't know that we'll be talking about this in 2 weeks' time. Any part of it, I think Kimmel will find his footing, like I say, in a different format, and that'll be that. I think Disney will continue doing what Disney does, and its stock will move on different metrics, or for different reasons. But
stock price is up slightly. I'm just saying.
So there you have it. So I
Yeah.
think the things that we think are so material in the moment, end up having a short life. I do think there's some kind of more enduring things. And Doug, I just want to commend you and Farzana for your podcast this week. This is becoming like the podcast review show, but
Yeah.
I thought your conversation with Amy,
Amy Pate. Yes.
yeah, on Amy Pate, sorry, on the polarization of conversation, and she was looking at it obviously from an American perspective, but it's clearly an international global development. So anyway, I
Yeah.
thought it was great. But you want to?
We were looking into, well, I mean, the Charlie Kirk assassination, I suppose, was the launching pad to this. But there was another shooting a couple of nights ago in Colorado, um, murder, suicide in Colorado. So this is, and again, it speaks to the polarization that's happening in a lot of countries. I don't mean to pick on the U.S. The U.S. just seems to make the most headlines, and her perspective predictably was that words have tremendous meaning these days. There's an old saying about sticks and stones breaking bones, but these days words draw blood, and we need to tone down the rhetoric, which we hear over and over and over again, but it has to be said again. We need to tone down the rhetoric. And an example of that was the president's response to the Kirk assassination, immediately drawing dividing lines amongst the populace and pointing to the so-called left. Don't need that. Don't need that. We need more conciliatory conversation. Michelle, just quickly, because we're tight on time here, your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I mean, I think this week, or the whole Kimmel, ABC, Disney situation has shown actually that, people are engaged and are going to take action. And, good luck to the brands and companies that, don't listen to the people. That's what my takeaway is.
Gotta listen.
Well, I think we're not going to have time to get into the last thing I want to mention, which is this Ipsos Brand America study. Maybe we can get into that next week. And to be fair, I've only read the headlines, but the headlines are that outside of the U.S., brands associated with America have suffered dramatically in the last 12 months with regard to how trustworthy they are and people's likelihood to purchase that. So that's for people who live outside the U.S. For people who live inside the U.S., it's actually increased in most cases. So interesting
Does it
illustration.
say anything about brands that are perceived as, I hate left and right as terms, but does it say anything about, oh, this is a left-leaning brand I'll buy, or this is a right-leaning?
I didn't get into that. I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. And maybe there's a tab that says that. But it was the striking difference was that outside the U.S., being affiliated with the American brand was not good, but it seemed to be okay inside the U.S. And I'm sure you're seeing that maybe in travel, in tourism.
Yeah.
But the whole other thing we should talk about at some point about promoting. So much to talk about.
This whole thing about, we were always told to wear our Canadian flags on our jackets or on our backpacks when traveling, and now this is spilling over into brands, and a lot of Canadian brands are here in Canada are deliberately positioning themselves as Canadian, which Tim Hortons can't do. Tim Hortons is not Canadian. It puts a little maple leaf in its logo, right? But it can't. It's Brazilian.
Well, people ask me here to be polite if I'm Canadian, knowing full well that I'm probably not Canadian. But that's a polite way of trying to figure out where I'm from. Well, I just want to say thank you, Michelle, for joining us. I will read your book, and I have listened to your podcast, and you're welcome back here any time.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for those kind words.
Doug, you want to take us out? You always have something.
Absolutely. I've got a real quick thought. I gave a presentation to Olympic athletes in Toronto this past week. And not part of the presentation, but in conversation, we started talking about momentum to move forward. And one of them noted in their sport, they can't move forward without moving back. And I think that's think about in Taekwondo, a punch, a jab, got to move backward before you thrust forward. Throwing a ball, kicking a ball. You got to move back before you move forward. So the message is, what is it you need to unlearn from your day-to-day to gain momentum to move forward? What is the step backward that you need to take first before you move forward? To think about that throughout the week. That is all time we have today. Hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks, as always, to Gold Star producers Emily Page and David Olajide, and our very first guest, Michelle Garrett. The Week Unspun is a co-production of Curzon Public Relations, Stories and Strategies, and Folgate Advisors. If you'd like to join the Advisory Club Mega Chats, get in touch with David Gallagher on LinkedIn. That is the best way, 24/7. He monitors it all the time. See you next week. Putting you on the spot. 3 a.m. You gotta respond. 3 a.m. That's all the time we have. Have a great weekend.